Welcome back. This is Madan. In this video, we are going to learn how you can add and use dependency injection feature in ASP.NET Core. So here we are in our project that we created earlier, and I'm in the pet repository class. So let's first see what problem we have currently with this class. So here in the pet controller class, we have a constructor pet controller which uses several parameters like application DB context and the client notification. And in the constructor itself here, we have used the pet repository and we have created the instance of the pet repository and we have passed the context from here. So if we look in this class, the pet controller class is tightly coupled or dependent on the pet repository class and application DB context class. So for instance, if we make any changes to the pet repository class, then that changes will affect the pet controller class as well. And the changes, if we make any changes to the pet repository class, then we need to make changes in the constructor of the pet controller as well, because the pet controller constructor initialize the pet repository class. So let's see that. I'm gonna head over to the pet repository class, and let's say we want to inject another parameter in any time in the future. So let's say I don't have anything to inject right now, so I'm just gonna inject the application DB context again. Let's say context 1. So at any point of time in future, we may need to inject other parameters and modify our class to fit the future requirements. So let's say we need to add another parameter to our pet repository class, and we have added the application DB context as a parameter. And here now, if we move over to the controller, then here we go, we see the error because the pet repository class constructor needs two parameter now. So in order to make the application able to run, we need to pass the another parameter here as well. So this should be simple if we use the pet repository class in only one controller, but in real application the situation is worse, because in real case we may want to use the pet repository class in many other controllers or many other places. So if we make any small changes in our pet repository class, then that change could break our whole application, and we need to make changes to all other classes that uses the pet repository class. So this is the disadvantage that we have got right now in our application. So let's remove this for now, and let's save this, and let's save this, and our error is gone here. So if we use dependency injection, then what we can do is we can remove the direct dependency of the pet controller from pet repository class, and we get more control over our application. So for instance, if we hand over this dependency, the dependency of pet repository class, from pet controller to something else, let's say the pet repository interface, then we don't need to reinitialize the pet repository class here, and then that removes the dependency of the pet repository from pet controller, and our classes becomes loosely coupled to each other. So here if we go to our pet repository class, then it implements the interface ipet repository. That means any pet repository variable can be converted back to ipet repository. So here if we go back to our pet controller, then here we have got the private variable of pet repository, and we have initialized this pet repository here. But instead what we can do is we can point this variable back to ipet repository. This is possible because pet repository implements ipet repository. So in this way we can point back our concrete class variable to the abstract implementation like interface. But once we convert this, our pet repository class to ipet repository variable, then in the constructor we need to reinitialize that variable to pet repository, so this doesn't eliminate any dependencies of our pet controller with pet repository. So ASP.NET Core provides us the functionality to handle the dependency injection out of the box. So if we head over to the startup class, then here is a method called configure service, and this method handles the dependency injections and provides us the feature to implement dependency injection in our classes. So what we can do from here is we can do services dot add transient, and then we can do ipet repository, and we can provide here the concurrent implementation, actual implementation, pet repository. Let's bring in the correct namespaces. So what this statement does is whenever our class need pet repository, then we can provide ipet repository to our class and use ipet repository during compile time. But whenever at runtime our class need pet repository, then the dependency injection feature will create the new instance of the pet repository and provide that to our class. This could be easily understood if I provide the demo of this here. So let's head over to the controller, and now what we can do is we can let's break down into multiple lines, and what we can do is we can do ipet repository pet repository. We can create the variable of the type ipet repository in the constructor of the pet controller, and what we can do inside the constructor is we can remove pet repository, new pet repository, and point that this local pet repository variable of ipet repository type to the one that we passed in the constructor here, pet repository. So with this what this does is whenever our application runs and whenever our constructor is initialized, then this ipet repository will be changed into pet repository, and the new instance of the pet repository will be created and handed over to the pet repository variable, so that our entire class can use the pet repository. So whenever our application whenever our constructor is initialized, it goes to here, and from here, yeah, it knows that whenever the ipet repository is used in any constructor of the any class, then the service will know that we want to create the instance of the pet repository, and it creates the instance of the pet repository. It goes to the pet repository constructor and see what parameters it goes to the pet repository constructor and see what parameters are there, and it provides all those parameters needed to initialize the pet repository, and finally it hand over the pet repository to our controller at runtime. So in this way we don't need to worry about the initialization of the pet repository class. This is all handled by this dependency injection layer. With this what we can do is we can remove the application db context from here, because we don't need to provide application db, we don't need to initialize pet repository class in our constructor anymore. This is done by the dependency injection, and so let's remove the application db context from here. Let's move this up, and let's remove this context from here, and let's remove this application db context from here, and with this we should be able to run our application. So in future, whenever we need to make any changes to our pet repository class, then we can easily make that changes here. So let's say at any point of time in future we want to add another parameter to the constructor of the pet repository class. Let's say application db context and context1, and if we save and if we head over back to the controller, then there are no errors because we haven't initialized the pet repository class here, and that is handled up by the addTransient method of the services. And what this method does is whenever we require the pet repository, it goes out there, it looks on the pet repository class, and it see what are the parameters required for the pet repository class, and it provides all those parameters and reinitialized the pet repository class and provide us that instance of the pet repository so that we can use it later. You can use it anywhere in our class. So let's go to our project and let's refresh this. And what we can see is our project is still up and running with no errors. So we can add a new pet from here. Let's say rabbit one, and yes. So there are different methods available for dependency injection: the addTransient method, addScoped method, and a singleton method. addTransient method, when we use addTransient method, then the instances of the classes will be created for every request we make. So for instance, when we go over to the controller and when we go over to the project and ask for the pet controller, then the instance of the pet repository will be created for every request we make. In this way, we can remove the dependency of between the classes using dependency injection, and our code becomes more future proof. And whenever we need to make any changes to our pet repository class, then we can go over and make changes to the pet repository class without affecting our pet controller. So if we remove this from here, let's say save, then there are no errors in our pet controller class. So this is how the loosely coupled system works, and this is the best practice in software development, and we must always use this feature. The dependency injection is itself a very big topic, and if you wanna learn more about dependency injection, then you can, of course, you can always do more research in dependency injection. And if you want to see more or learn more about this, then you can always Google and you can type dependency injection ASP.NET Core, and if you head over to this link, then you will see a more detailed information about dependency injection. All right, that's it for now. I'll see you soon, and thanks for watching.